Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1986 soundtrack album, Trick or Treat. Rock and roll, rockin' after midnight, steal your soul. So as you can see, I'm definitely a fan of this album. But before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on this album, I would like to give a special shout out to Bronson for requesting this video. And if there's another album, film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to either my PayPal or to my Patreon. The link to both is in the video description down below, and I will try to get to your request as soon as I possibly can. Now, what's interesting about this album is that it's pretty unique when it comes to soundtrack albums. A lot of soundtrack albums, they feature various artists. So they feature various different bands and singers who contribute various different songs to the soundtrack. Some of them are exclusive to the soundtrack, some are just licensed for the soundtrack, but a lot of times it's a compilation. It's not an instance where one artist does everything. And this album is the exception to that rule when it comes to soundtracks. One artist, in Fastway, at least one band, they contribute all the tracks to this soundtrack. And it's also something that is done by design because of the way that the film was written. The film was written about a band, a heavy metal band led by this controversial lead singer named Sammy Kerr, and he was involved in Satan worship and stuff like that, and he died, and then he comes back through this uh, haunted or cursed record, and his spirit is now back in the world of the living, and he's wreaking havoc, and you have to have continuity. So in order to have that continuity, you need to have one band do all the songs that the actor who is playing that particular role of Sammy Kerr, which in this instance in the film it was Tony Fields, can lip sync with the lyrics and with the vocals, and you can have a somewhat authentic performance by this fictional band in the film. And so that's a big reason why you don't have any other music in the soundtrack. Although, to be honest, it would have been interesting to have seen Trick or Treat inspired tracks by Wasp or Gene Simmons or Ozzy Osbourne specifically for this album, but I don't feel that the producers of the film could afford that. They could get Gene Simmons and Ozzy Osbourne to do cameo appearances in the movie playing different characters, uh, but they couldn't afford to get licensing or get them to do exclusive tracks for the album. So they had to go into a different route, and that's when they wound up uh, getting Fastway involved. Because I think Fastway was one of the best available bands in the producer's price range for this film. Now, Fastway is a band that's comprised of guitarist Fast Eddie Clark and bass player Pete Way. They were part of previous bands called Motorhead and UFO, and they were disgruntled and really not into what was going on with their current bands. So they decided to leave those bands and form a band that ultimately became known as Fastway. They got a drummer from another band called Humble Pie named Jerry Shirley, and added him to the band. And then they brought in a vocalist who was actually an unknown name at the time, and Dave King. So Fastway was actually a pretty popular band at the time. So it wasn't one of those things where they got an unknown band or unknown vocalists like the people who did the Hard Rock Zombie soundtrack, for instance. They actually got an accomplished band who had already done like 3 albums before this soundtrack album, and I think that's a big part of why the songs that they did for the film are as good as they are and still hold up really well, because this is a really experienced band at this point doing all of this work. And the track After Midnight is honestly one of their best songs. And it's a culmination of their hard work and their experience in the music industry and with heavy metal, and it is honestly one of my favorite soundtrack songs is After Midnight. But the album as a whole, for the most part, is pretty pretty good. I would think I would say that in comparison to some of the other soundtracks that were part of heavy metal horror films, other than Shocker, like this is right up there, near the top. It's an album that features a couple tracks that are from some previous albums by Fastway to kind of fill the album, because there's only really 7 original songs that they did for this soundtrack album, and some of them are definitely pretty short. Like for instance, track 1, Trick or Treat. It's a short song. It's like 2 minutes and 47 seconds. It's not very long at all, but it's still good. It's still fun to listen to. And the vocals are still just as powerful, just as strong by uh, Dave King. And you also have some really great guitar work by Fast Eddie Clark, some good bass work by Pete Way. The vocals, they're fine for the kind of song that it is. Um, it's a good opener to the album. But track 2, like that's the headbanger. After Midnight, catchy hooks, catchy chorus, great guitar solos, uh, really kick-ass vocals, just overall just a really well made, well produced heavy metal song. Uh, the third track is Don't Stop the Fight. That one's kind of there for me. Like I don't mind it, but it's just kind of all right. Like the vocals are fine, so is all the other guitar work and drums and stuff like that, but it's a bit long and kind of repetitive and just eh. But I can definitely listen to it. It's not like it makes my ears bleed, but it's not really something that I would listen to on repeat like After Midnight. Track 4 I felt was better, was an improvement, Stand Up. That's another one of my favorites from this album. Stand up and be counted. Don't push your luck too far. Stand up and be counted. Yeah, so I definitely enjoy that particular track. Once again, got some really powerful, really strong, really solid vocals, good guitar work, a good bass, drums. Um, the lyrics are a bit repetitive, but the hook is catchier than something along the lines of "Don't Stop the Fight." So it still is something that I can deal with. Track 5 is called "Tear Down the Walls." This one is barely a song. Like a lot of it is just pure instrumental work, some kind of atmospheric, experimental stuff. Uh, Barely any lyrics, barely any traditional structure. Um, but that's how it appears in the film itself. So I think that song was intentionally kind of made more for mood and atmosphere than necessarily something to listen to over and over again. Um, Track 6 is called Get Tough. That one's not too bad either, but it's still kind of in the same vein as like "Don't Stop the Fight for Me." It's just there. All the other elements, like the vocals, the guitar work, the drums, the bass, like the chorus, the bridge, all that is serviceable. It's decent, but it's definitely not awesome. It's not one that you're gonna listen to a lot. Uh, Track seven's kind of in the same boat. Hold on to the night. Um, that one's more of a poppy kind of one, more close to like AOR than metal. That's more of like the dance track. And it's adequately catchy at points and kind of a bop, but not really anything that is on the same level as After Midnight or Stand Up. The last 2 tracks are not even I don't even think they're even in the movie, and if they are in the film, it's just in the background, and they're not very noticeable. This is just a couple more tracks by Fastway from other albums that they did. So you have Heft, which was on their first album. I don't really care for this track, to be honest. You could tell that it's from an album from, like, 1983. It sounds very different from the other, tracks on the album. It's like 5 minutes and 19 seconds. It's way over long. It's just I honestly didn't think it was that good. I just thought it was ambitious, which I do appreciate. I still think the vocals are good. Um, but there was stuff in it that just felt like it was played out and just a little bit too overblown, and I didn't feel the hook was that good, and yeah, I wasn't really big on that particular song. But If You Could See from All Fired Up, that is an incredible song. That's a great track. I think it's a little bit more of a power ballad than a traditional metal song, but it still slaps. I still really like that song. I definitely feel that it's one of Fastway's better songs overall. So it's nice to have it on here so people can get more of an introduction to Fastway in terms of their style, their type of music. So, they can hear certain songs or like some of the better songs that they've done on this soundtrack album. So it can be like a gateway album for people to discover and potentially get into Fastway. Uh, I do like Fastway. I've always liked Fastway. Like, as soon as I first, heard this album, I was curious about checking out their other albums. I think their later albums after Trick or Treat, that don't have the same lead singer are not that good, because I think a big part of what made Fastway great, was Dave King, um, because of his unique sounding, vocals and just the strength and overall power that he had vocally. Without that, it's just, the Fastway just isn't as good. Um, but yeah, I like the first 3 albums that they did, and I also really enjoy and have a lot of fun with this album. So I would say, like, if you are a big fan of like 80s heavy metal, this is definitely an album that I would recommend. If it's not the kind of metal or the kind of music that you're really that fond of or you're really that into, then maybe not, because it is very much what you expect from an 80s metal or hair metal kind of band. But if you like that kind of music, like, there's a lot to really enjoy and find to be honestly quite a treat when it comes to this album. No pun intended. But anyway, thanks for watching my review of the Trick or Treat soundtrack. And until next time, I'll see you later. See ya. Death to false metal.